Hi, this is Jason Oberlander, Chief Commercial Officer at ASM Global, and this is One-on-One with ADC Partners.
Hi, this is Dave Almy of ADC Partners. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Well, that little pearl of Aristotelian wisdom is probably one of the most frequently used, or maybe overused, phrases in the business world. But the meaning can be a little opaque at times. Well, unless you're Jason Oberlander, the Chief Commercial Officer for ASM Global, he knows exactly what it means. You see, Jason is charged with generating commercial activity for ASM's network of over 350 stadiums, arenas, convention centers, and other facilities located around the world. Driving revenue is increasingly tied to constructing a single platform for his partners from all those different parts. In our conversation, Jason and I talk about how ASM plans to accomplish that lofty goal, lessons learned from the COVID era, what goes into developing a great partnership, and much more. You'll even get a little French lesson. Que bon, mon ami. So, Jason Oberlander, if you can provide a quick overview of the ASM Global business, I think that would be really helpful for folks, because I think ASM sometimes operates a little bit out of sight from how most people see the sports business world. So give us a little bit of sense of what that is. How did it get started, and what kind of scale are we really looking at today?
Yes, sure. So ASM Global is really the product of a merger pre-COVID.
There was a time pre-COVID.
Yeah, there was a time. And it was a merger between AEG facilities and SMG facilities.
Okay.
And the combined entity created the largest venue management company in the world. So we manage 350 venues globally.
Yikes.
Across the arena, stadium, theater, amphitheater, convention center, and other space.
How long do they give you to visit all of those?
Yeah, it's a lifetime. I don't know anyone that's checked off all of them.
I mean, can you even check out 50% of those? My gosh,
Right.
It's such a huge portfolio. But I mean, in your role as Chief Commercial Officer, obviously it's sort of integral to have a fairly decent sense of, what the buildings are, what they offer, and everything like that. So if you could, what is the Chief Commercial Officer for ASM Global? What falls under your purview on a day-to-day basis?
It's broader than sponsorships.
Okay.
In the sense that we can do a number of different partnership, modes, B2B front,
Right.
integrated into operations, but it also includes, guest facing partnerships with brands.
Yeah.
So anything tied to engagement with brands
Yep.
for sponsorship, naming rights, advertising falls into the realm of commercial partnerships.
Right. So that really consumer facing stuff that people are very familiar with, the names on the buildings and the signs inside the stadiums, that's certainly one piece of it. But there's a whole nother element of it too, which is that B2B facing stuff. You obviously came particularly out of IMG College and Learfield and all those pieces where the consumer facing pieces were so, overt. It was the B2B piece provide sort of a different lens for you? Is this like you've got a lot of familiarity with it, or has there been a learning curve?
It's not unfamiliar. We certainly did B2B partnerships within the collegiate space and even before that when I was with the NBA.
Right.
So I'm familiar with that conversation and how those partnerships come to life. Here it's a little different in the sense that it's just weighted towards those partnerships, at least in the early days.
Right.
Because I think one of the big opportunities we have going forward is figuring out how we harness all the touch points for guest-facing engagement over time.
Because that's changing on a minute-by-minute basis, right?
That's right. And I think, we know what those guest-facing, touch points are. To some extent, we can deliver them today, but to do it in a way that is networked
Yeah.
and linked that
Yeah.
provides ease of activation at scale is our opportunity. So we're looking to build, a digital out of home network that links up all of our screens inside the building and outside. We're looking to make investments in new screens. We're putting our web platform on a new trajectory that's going to be more commercially friendly and viable. Our social, platform, data monetization, for retargeting purposes for brands. These are all elements that we're pursuing to be able to provide engagement to brands at scale.
Has that been surprising to you, or sort of what's really energized you partly about this role? Because it sounds like what you're talking about is like it's taking, all right, so we have 350 different arenas and stadiums and facilities in the portfolio. But it sounds like to this point, they've more or less the assets kind of live within those particular facilities. With what you're talking about, it sounds like you're creating, for lack of a better term, and it's overused, so I apologize to everybody who's heard this a million times, a global platform for 1 by 350 facilities, if that's where a global brand really wants to go.
Yeah, no, that's what attracted me to the opportunity is it's a massive platform, but it hasn't been tapped on a network-wide basis at scale previously. So it's a build. It's not stepping into an existing, ready to go proposition. It's a proposition that is very attractive and viable today, but has great potential, as we continue to make it more sophisticated and build it out.
So it's such a fascinating opportunity, and something that's so unique to being able to be on that facility side of the ball. And so I'm wondering, as someone who has you've got a long history in sports. I mean, you've worked in sports media and the NBA, and you've worked in MMR for college. How does working on the facility side differ for you? I mean, what surprised you the most about, brick and mortar?
Yeah. Well, I guess the most surprising thing is how similar it is in the sense that,
Same old thing.
yeah, the conversation with partners takes the same trajectory. It's about understanding their objectives, what they're
Yeah.
trying to accomplish, how we integrate them into our platform in a way that, showcases their brand in an impactful way that is
Right.
of value to our guests and other stakeholders. So it's very similar in that regard. I'd say where it differs is instead of focusing on the field of play,
Hmm.
we're focusing on everything around the field of play.
Everything but.
That's right. So it's the experience that, starts when they buy their ticket and all the communication that happens, around that, to when they, figure out how they're going to get to the game, to the parking experience, to what they feel and experience when they walk into the building, to the VIP areas and premium areas, to the concessions. It's really identifying how we can improve that experience for our guests and who the right partners are to help us do that, and then having those conversations.
Yeah, I tell you, it's one of those things you talk about 1,000 times, and I think most people understand it to be true, but you can't underestimate or undervalue that driveway back to driveway experience that people have with a entertainment experience, right? Because a guest's entire perception of a visit can be changed by an interaction with a parking attendant.
That's
And
right.
so, having the complete overview, that's a huge responsibility. And when you're doing it 350 times over, that's a big ball of wax you're dealing with there, my friend.
Yeah, but it's fun for that very same reason. It's the scale that gets the interests of our partners. It's what allows us to have an impact on their behalf.
Right. I think this would be fascinating too, and sort of interesting too, because I know coming out of Learfield in the multimedia rights space, you often have to spend so much time working not only to develop the partnerships, but also to get access to the things that you want to develop that partnership, the things that you realize they really need in order to accomplish the objectives that you define. So there is kind of an ownership capacity now that you have that maybe in previous roles hadn't been quite so concrete. I mean, I'm assuming that offers a relatively interesting ownership capacity in how you deliver those kinds of things.
Yeah, it's exciting, but again, the process is remarkably similar.
It's, the more things
We have
change.
Yeah, we have, at Learfield, I was working across 180, collegiate athletic programs. But we had a GM at each of those properties. And
Hmm.
very similarly, we have a GM here at each of our buildings. And they are the heart and soul of our business. Like it really requires their embracing of a program, and their involvement in bringing it to life that makes it work.
So you still are selling into both sides, right? It's the
Yeah,
GMs that, yeah, boots on the
that
ground.
doesn't go away. I mean, if you want it to be a successful partnership, you need that level of buy-in and commitment.
And I suppose that's kind of a natural segue to my next question too, right? If the GMs are the heart of it, then it really doesn't matter, I'm assuming, about the scale of the kinds of properties that we're talking about here. Because I mean, I looked at the web as your diligent podcast host. I looked at the website before we had this conversation, and there is a pretty broad scale of arenas and stadiums that you're managing, right? I mean, it's
That's right.
everything from the gigantic Super Bowl stadiums like Allegiant Field in Vegas down to minor league baseball stadiums in Stockton.
Mhm.
So, from your perspective, how does managing those kinds of commercial activities and expectations differ when you're talking about, huge football stadium or small minor league baseball stadium, or is it all the same no matter what? It's just butts and seats and drive revenue.
No, it does vary, in significant ways.
Yeah,
And in particular, where we have, an NFL pro team, in the building, that requires very different conversation, than another building where, we're dealing with, an ECHL hockey team,
right.
a G League team.
Are you
Um,
suggesting that the NFL is sort of fixed in their ways and what their expectations are and have certain
No,
demands over?
I think they're good partners, but it does require, having those in-depth conversations to see if it makes sense. And you're obviously navigating around their partners.
And so protective of the shield and everything
That's
that's
right.
tied to it, right? So anything you
That's
want to
right.
do has to make sure that it reflects well on that, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. And then, we work in all types of genres, and sports is just one of them. So music, and then the convention center space, it's an entirely different proposition that is totally white space.
Yeah, it's totally why it's fascinating too, right? Because so much attention is focused on sports, right? And the
Mhm.
excitement and it's very sexy and everything like that. But if you talk about bodies through turnstiles, convention centers
It's
trip
massive. Yeah.
it's like unbelievably massive.
Yeah, and it's uncluttered. It's a white space environment for brands who really haven't, cracked the code. I think largely because no one's helping them navigate it until now on how to really engage with exhibitors and those attendees.
And I think in the past I would have said something along the lines of, the difference is that, sports generate so much emotional
That's right.
portion, content associated with it, right? So the sale is a little different, but you know, there's certain convention. You look at CES and the Consumer Electronics Group gathering that's going on in Vegas right now. That generates a lot of excitement and energy around it too. So, the delta between the two of them might not be as far as what I had thought in the past, and I'm sure that's one of the ways that you're looking at it too.
No, absolutely. And I think, from a high level, we look at the guest traffic across our
Yeah.
buildings globally. That's 164 million. It's coming through our building. So it's arguably, the largest live event marketing platform out there. Now,
That's just a lot of people.
yeah, you can't imagine, a scenario where a brand is going to step in or can step in,
Yeah.
to take advantage of that entire scale. But that's where the conversation goes to objectives and priorities. Where does that brand want to show up? Where do they need to show up? Where do they need to make a difference? Then we overlay that against our portfolio, and understand, do we need to key in on sports? Can it be music centric? Does it matter? The brand really drives us in those decisions.
Yeah, that's fascinating too, right? Because it's not just you can take a look at what each brand is doing from an existing standpoint. When you're talking about global brands, I mean, they're all involved in different things and doing, sports and entertainment and a variety of different things in that regard too. But when you have such a network of facilities, boy, you can really start to mix and match to come up with something that reflects not only what they want to do, but what they're already doing.
Mhm.
So that's such a powerful piece. I'm wondering also too, like, And so we talked about scope and scale associated with the number of, versus like Super Bowl stadiums versus minor league baseball stadiums. How's your experience been just doing that from like national versus international, right? Is the approach that you have to take differ if you're talking about GMs in the US versus, because the arena business is incredibly international, right? It's, it's Europe, it's South America, it's in the Middle East. How does your approach shift in dealing with different international markets like that? Are the expectations the same?
No, they are different.
Yeah.
And I think our opportunity is different, by region around the globe. So it's possible to strike a global partnership or work in any, venue that we manage. But the focus is really on the US and Europe.
Yeah.
Because our commercial opportunity is just stronger there. And that's where we're spending a lot of our time, energy, and resource as it relates to partnerships.
So when you say upside, is that related to the idea of like, boy, we have so much ceiling to be able to hit. There's so much more activity that we can do here, and limitations in some of the other markets, or the other markets, like there's so much going on there already?
It also,
much
it's a function of our deal structure,
Okay.
with each of those venues as well.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's not just one type of contract.
Right. So we have different venues and we have different deal structures with, those venue types. So it's a puzzle.
And it's an international business too. I mean, is this some of your first international exposure to these kinds of deals and putting those together that way, or is that
in
just more
some
reflection?
time,
Yeah.
because obviously working in the collegiate space, you're very US centric.
Just a bit.
But when I worked at the NBA,
Yeah.
that was a global business, and it was a fast growing global business. So
Right.
there's a lot of interest from partners in understanding how, they could work with us in Europe or China or, Africa.
In a little bit, I'm going to ask you about to reflect on like how partnerships have changed over that, because you've been involved in putting together these kinds of relationships between brands and sports for a pretty long time now. So I'm interested in your perspective. Before we get there, though, you started at ASM in September 2021.
That's right.
And there was this little thing going on. I don't know if you can think back as far as you possibly can into the dumpster fire that was COVID and what that did to the entertainment facility business. I mean, it was just that. It was a dumpster fire.
It was.
Reflect back on that time. I mean, you come in there and it's like, what was that moment like? I mean, was it chaos? Was it throw my hands up and run around type stuff? I mean,
I think it was a fortunate time to start. It was September, and it felt like that hour right before the sun rises.
Oh, really? So you felt like
yeah.
it was happening?
I felt like it was happening. I knew that the marketplace was waking up because we had an almost record year in new business at the field for national partnerships. So
Wow.
I knew that the marketplace was primed to get back to work and figure out how to, move their businesses forward. And stepping into ASM when I did, was right as venues were planning to reopen, and it was happening at different stages across the globe, but it was just starting to happen, and that afforded me the opportunity to kind of be there right as it was reawakening.
So that's pretty amazing. Like you come in right in the middle of it, but even at that time, there was, okay, I can see where things are heading, right? You can see, like to use your term, like the sun was starting to rise. Because it was, pardon my language, it was pretty shitty there for a while.
It was terrible. And we were all, me included, working from home. And,
yeah,
this opportunity with ASM Global, I wanted and had the opportunity to come into the office and be visible. I mean, it was very sparse, around LA Live and offices here at the time.
LA not quite so live at that point.
Yeah. It was an opportunity to, spend quality time with my boss and the CEO, Ron Benson, and some of his recent hires. It was a small crew in a quiet office, but it gave us an opportunity to kind of get our feet under us and think about how we're planning for this reawakening.
That has to be kind of a unique challenge too, right? Because partnerships in developing partnerships. I mean, for all the tactics and skills that you put against it and things like this is a people business, right? I
Right.
mean you want to be engaged with people. If you can't do it effectively if you're not interested in the stories that people are telling and trying to problem solve and working with them to come up with solutions and things like that. Was there a bit of a kind of moment where you'd like that? I'm like the working from home thing is great because you save time on the commute and all that, but I mean it's hard to be working solo, particularly in a new job. What was that like?
There wasn't an opportunity to right out of the gate to engage partners because I needed to learn. I needed to
Yeah, okay, so that's
understand,
fair. Yeah.
the platform. I need to go and visit. I actually took a trip out to the UK and did a tour of our UK properties in November. This was kind of in that window between reawakening and Omicron,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they were just starting to come back to the office. They hadn't been back in the office yet. So when I was able to go out there, they were regrouping for the first time. So there was this sense of optimism and
People
excitement.
emerging from a
Yeah,
holes.
people emerging from, they hadn't seen each other in a couple of years, so it was,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it was, it felt good because starting to connect with people again and spend quality time with people again.
I mean, ultimately, that's the entertainment experience
That's
all
right.
about. I mean, that's why you have these facilities to begin with, as much as
Yeah.
we want to think that it's the thing
That's
of
why I'm
choice.
in this line of work,
Right.
because I like to engage with people. I like to, talk to people, like to get to know people. And, I think in the world of Zoom when we were, in the dark days of quarantine, it was interesting because it was really productive. I found you could knock out a lot of conversations quickly. You weren't planning for travel, you weren't on a plane, you weren't stuck on a tarmac somewhere. So you were able to do a lot of volume related to conversations, but the quality of those conversations was not as good, and that only takes you so far, particularly if you're trying to start a new relationship.
Absolutely, right. It's that human connection kind of thing. You can't undersell it. I mean, I know it's like the technologies that we have to be able to bridge those gaps are great, and they definitely fill a role, but it's just not the same as being able to, look someone in the eye and just have offhand conversations and things like that. But I'm curious, like, if you feel like, are there any lessons from the pandemic that you take to the business? Like, okay, well, we had to do that during the pandemic, but you know what? That actually might be useful going forward post pandemic.
I don't know if it's a new lesson so much as underscoring the importance of an old lesson, which is relationships are really important,
Yeah.
particularly when you're going through a difficult, challenging time as an individual, as a team, as a company.
Yeah.
Your partners are key,
Yeah.
and in helping you navigate that, whether that's related to the X's and O's of business, or just being able to vent about how challenging things are, and being able to share that with someone.
Shared experience rather than just going out to the front yard and yelling at the squirrels.
Right.
Now, I'm not
Exactly.
saying I've ever done that, and I'm not saying that I have squirrels that are very shocked and frightened around where I live, but I understand exactly what you're trying to say. Now,
Yeah.
everybody's listening is like, this guy is clearly insane.
The other thing I'd say, and it's related to relationship, is just having empathy,
Yeah.
and really taking a moment to understand, what your team is going through or what your partners are going through, and either in their professional or personal lives. And there were a lot of hard decisions made. At the company I was working at, and everywhere, left and right, and we had to. A lot of people were let go during that time
Yeah.
frame. Just making sure you staying connected with them to figure out how you can help. How can you help them network? What references can you provide? It was key, I think.
Well, also, you're talking about relationships that you're creating from a partnership perspective, especially that are almost required to be long term, right?
Mhm.
That's really where the efficiency of the partnership equation comes to bear, right? You're steering away from 1 and 2 year deals and things like that.
Yeah.
You can't, I mean, the obvious lesson is you can't risk long term benefit where you may have to take one step back to go 2 steps forward in order to capture that. I need to do that short-term win in order, because that's what the books are saying to do right now. And that's not always an easy thing to do because, like you said, I mean, when we were talking previously, the cycle resets every year. But that's the strategy that has to go into that thing which you just talked about. It's empathy and understanding what that's going to be, and how do you construct the deals to be able to reflect what somebody's going through in that moment, so you can prepare for something longer term.
Yeah, and I think empathy leads to trust, and trust leads to being able to have an open conversation about where your pain points are, where theirs are, how you guys can help each other in that process.
So let's talk about trust a little bit, right? Because I think we've seen a few facilities. I mean, just over your right shoulder is crypto.com arena. I think we've seen a few facilities with crypto naming rights in particular get burned, very high profile stuff with FTX going down and all the crazy, and others are now sweating about where that next big payment's going to be coming from. And I'm wondering from your perspective, right, if it's always on the lookout for the next big category, right? What's going to be the thing that draws new revenues to the facilities? How do you protect, like, what do you feel like is your responsibility to make sure that, okay, this is a very attractive opportunity, but it's a very, very risky bet? Is that a calculus that you make? Is it, what's the process that you put in place to be able to guard against things like that?
Yeah, I think understanding that there is risk,
Yeah.
is a starting point. How you quantify, the worst case scenario, the likely worst case scenario, sharing, what that risk looks like with all of your key stakeholders, and then doing what you can to hedge against it,
Right.
or mitigate it. And,
Right.
and it's unique in every situation, but on the whole, you may need to decide it's not an opportunity you want to pursue, for that reason. Or if you are going to pursue it, it's clear, that with everyone involved that there's some risk attached.
Has there ever been a moment where you've looked at a company that's saying, boy, we want to shower you with money right now, and you looked at it and said, I mean, I don't know if these folks are gonna, maybe the brand's not the right fit, or I don't know if these people are going to be around in 18 months. So you take that step back. Is it a difficult conversation?
I won't, name names,
Sure,
but
sure.
yes, I've certainly experienced that in the past.
Yeah.
Especially, when you're on the front line of business development, or you're leading people on the front line of business development, they're hungry,
It's an eyes wide open construct, right? To be able to make sure that the people who are going into the relationship see all the possibilities and all the different avenues associated with that.
Yeah, and you can't obviously predict the future, but I think you can gauge, likely outcomes.
Outcomes, yeah. And I think you were also alluding to the idea that this is a hard thing to do, particularly when you're leading business development teams, right? Because I think people who are putting together these partnerships, they are naturally optimistic. They're going to see the opportunity and, oh, this is going to be great, and we can do this stuff. Managing that could be really, really tough for your team to be able to say, wait, hey, I know you love this deal and it's a huge revenue piece, but how do you look at it objectively? How do you get them to look at it objectively? Does it go back to that same sort of thing? We've just got to look at it in all its different
I think you just got to, gather the facts as best you can. And sometimes that involves reaching out to your finance team and saying, can you do some due diligence on this group?
Oh, okay, yeah. Bringing other people in.
Yeah, understand. Do they have, any actions against them, any liens against them,
So you just really do the best you can.
Yeah, you do the best you can. And if you're not getting any data, that's already,
right. In this day and age, right? Yeah. I can't find this company online at all. The ASM business it's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, for all the complexities and new technologies and everything like that, digital signage networks, this is all about getting people through the turnstiles.
That's exactly right.
I mean, that's exactly when we boil it right down to its core components. So I'm wondering then, with your investments in new technology to drive new commercial opportunities, there's also technologies that are going on that are not necessarily helpful to the business case that ASM brings to the table. Because I'm thinking, like, with virtual reality starting to become more of a thing, streaming is so much more prevalent. Do you think that's anything that will ever supplant the live experience, or is that something that you need to guard against from the kinds of programs you're putting together?
I don't think it's something to worry about maybe in the trajectory of my career. I think it's way down the road. And I say this,
Your kids are going to have to worry about it.
yeah, I think, my wife works at Meta, and I've had an opportunity to experience Oculus, and it's great. It's phenomenal. But there is no way that today it's replacing, a live concert experience. So I think it's all additive and complementary at the moment, and I think obviously we all need to keep an eye on it and figure out how it can enhance and support, the growth of our business. But I don't see it being an imminent, concern.
Do you and the wife sit around across the dining room table at each other and like have this argument?
We really try not to talk about work when we come home.
Okay, good.
And I think we're pretty good at it. Yeah.
Honey, let's argue about the live versus virtual experience. That'll be a great way to spend time with the kids. All right, so let's wrap it up with some perspective on your approach to partnerships, because like we talked about, you've been doing this for a while. Mm-hmm. And you've developed a skill set over a variety of different properties that you've worked for, putting together partnerships of a variety of different scopes and scales, national, local, now obviously global. What does a successful partnership look like from your perspective? And what are the key things that you look that go into constructing them? For people who are listening on this and saying, boy, I really want to ramp up my game, mm-hmm. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I think it all comes back to your client's objectives, and really developing a deep understanding of what they're trying to accomplish, what their business is, who they're trying to talk to, what they want them to do or believe about their brand. And then looking at your own platform and saying, this is how I can deliver against that brief. And whatever those KPIs are, keeping them front and center and measuring against them continuously and figuring out how to optimize, because your first attempt may not be the right approach. You may need to iterate and evolve. And if you're not prepared to do that, then, you're not being a partner.
I think it's one of the hardest things for people, particularly in our line of work, to wrap their arms around sometimes, because you're representing a property. Yet in your capacity, your interests are really focused on somebody else's objectives, mm-hmm. right? You're trusting the idea that you're going to benefit because you're able to deliver against their objectives, but you really have to. It goes back to that idea of empathy. You really have to look through the eyes of that other person, or a brand, or whoever it is you're engaged with, to figure out what the solve is.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's the core of the whole discipline, of the whole job is getting into their business, getting into their head, understanding, their pain points, their opportunities, and how you can help them get there.
I mean, it's one thing to be, we talked about you have to ramp up on being, COVID was great because you have to ramp up on the facilities business and everything like that goes along with working at ASM. But I mean, your capacity, you kind of have to be expert in the top 100 categories of business and where their pressure points are. And it's a constant learning cycle, right. Isn't it?
Yeah. And you have to be curious, and you have to ask the right questions, and not everyone knows how to articulate, what it is they're trying to do. Sometimes you have to tease it out, in conversation. And that's where, the relationship building, the trust, the empathy all play a role.
I'll coalesce into one thing. Jason Oberlander, Chief Commercial Officer of ASM Global. Thank you very much for spending some time. But before I let you go, I'm going to put you through the lightning round.
Let's do it.
Let's do this. All right, there's a bunch of questions. You have no idea what's about to hit you. So let's get right at it. Okay, your undergraduate work was at McGill University in Quebec.
That's right.
James Naismith, the inventor of basketball, is a notable alumnus. So in your best Quebecois accent, please say, hang the peach basket 10 feet high.
Monte le basket 10 feet. Let me get back up. It's
lightning round,
all right,
Oberlander. We gotta go.
All right. Monte le basket de pêche 10 pieds en avant.
Oh, que bon, monsieur.
Oh, yeah.
All right. ASM manages Ring Central Stadium, aka O.co Coliseum, aka Overstock.com Coliseum, aka McAfee Coliseum, aka Network Associates Coliseum, aka Oakland Alameda County Coliseum. So my question is this: when is it my turn to have my name on it?
Well, the naming rights opportunity for Oakland Arena is now available. So
you just never
you
stop
want to put
selling.
an offer forward,
ADC Partners Coliseum coming up anytime soon. You just never stop selling, do you? All right, you moved from New York City to LA when you took the current job. What do you miss the most about New York City?
I miss walking the streets of Manhattan or Brooklyn for that matter, or Queens. It's a special place. It's a pedestrian city. You're on the street, you're on the sidewalk, and life is happening all around you, and that's exciting.
It's a little different than Los Angeles.
You're in LA, you're in your car. You've got armor around you. You don't have the same connection to the city that you have in New York.
All right, so similar kind of vein of that question. There's been a bit of precipitation in California recently. How would you describe rain driving skills in Los Angeles?
Poor.
It doesn't really need more than that. All right, last one. You've sold national partnerships for college sports at IMG College and later Learfield, as we've established. What's your best college football experience?
Ooh, tough one. They're all so good, but I think going to Austin for University of Texas football game is my favorite. It just an incredible environment, incredible fan base, incredible game production. It's second. That's right, hook 'em horns.
Jason Oberlander, Chief Commercial Officer of ASM Global. Appreciate the time, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this ADC Partners podcast. For more information about ADC Partners, please visit our website at adcpartners.com.